as we just said a few moments ago, this is actually the first time that we're seeing each other face to face, even though we've worked together in such a deep way,
Yeah, it's
right?
incredible. I think we started in 2021, 2022.
It could have been back then because I think, help me if I'm misremembering, but I think you had applied, for a submission on Upwork for one of the, collaborations I wanted to do.
Mm.
But I might have chosen another artist, and then I had contacted you again to apply for other songs. Does that
Yes, that's exactly what
sound
happened.
familiar? Yeah,
Yeah.
so I want to say that this is a shout out to singer songwriters that just because for whatever reason it's not a match the first time, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that the collaborator isn't going to go back and listen to you again, right?
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
true. What do they always say? No doesn't mean no. Like
Yes.
it's all about building a good relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to just welcome everyone. This is the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention and our Talking Back to Suicide podcast. And you may have noticed that Kino, the co-host, is not with us in this moment, but he's hoping to join us. Kino lives in Cape Town, South Africa, and they're having power outages. And he was hopeful that everything was going to be fine this morning, but right now it's not. But if he's able to join us, he definitely is. And could you say, Ginger, that because when I texted you about the whole thing, you said how you had lived in Cape Town too, and you weren't surprised. So tell us a little bit about, why you were living in Cape Town and what's the power situation there.
Sure. So I was living in Cape Town for 2 years. I had met a boy there, and so I decided to just go to Cape Town. For some reason, I'm not sure of the exact reason, but they have load shedding, is what they call it. And they choose a particular area, and they shut off your power for 2 to 4 hours. I think it's because they don't have the ability to handle the amount of power they need, or something like that. And so they'll turn it off, and usually they give you the schedule for when they turn it off, so you can kind of plan around that. Sometimes they do change it, which might be what the co-host is experiencing. But yeah, it's very annoying. It just I when I first went there in 2021, they didn't even really have load shedding, and then for some reason in the last 2 years, it's just gotten really bad.
When I wrote to Kino, I said that I quoted you. You said, I understand. I used to live there.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
Yeah. So as you know, the Talking Back to Suicide podcast is an invitation for those with lived mental health experiences of themselves, family members, friends, to talk about suicide and talk about its prevention. We also have healthcare experts and other experts. I um, have invited recently someone from Oregon who's with a gun safety program in
Mm.
terms of locking up weapons. I'm hoping that he's going to join us. So there's so many different aspects to suicide prevention. Another example is social media,
Hmm.
right? I just read an article in the New York Times too, just the other day. It was an article on chat bots where they will role play in a way.
Hmm.
The chat box is role playing. They're pretending they're the therapist, but it'll say psychiatrist and it'll say therapist. But then
Mm.
there's a disclaimer saying that, of course, the chat box is not a psychiatrist or a therapist,
Yes.
and the character will also even might even say they're certified. It'll give us backstory. This make believe psychiatrist went to Harvard, but then there's a disclaimer saying that's not real. And the article was
Wow.
about people interacting with these chatbots, sometimes to their detriment, their mental health decline.
Mm.
Even in one situation, um, terribly, a young person died by suicide related to intense interaction with the chatbot, and also that with the algorithm, somehow the chatbot being not a human being who could be listening and empathizing with what the person was saying, was starting to feed the youngster sort of confirmation that they should kill themselves.
Really?
Just horrifying. And then
Wow.
there was another lawsuit having to do with a young person that was using this particular chatbot, and they were becoming more and more aggressive. And it seemed
Mm.
as well that this chatbot was encouraging that behavior. So again, going back to
Wow.
talking back to suicide, there's many things that we need to address. And the reason why I wanted to have you on, and I'm so grateful that you are, and I want you to take good care of yourself while we have this conversation,
Sure.
and feel free to say, no, I prefer not to talk about that if it gets too tender, emotional for you,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to begin by talking about how we met. And we touched upon that a little earlier. So I'm a retired psychiatrist now, but I'm also a poet and an artist. And I've found that a lot of my poetry has just been not with the idea of, oh, I'm going to write a poem, or, oh, I'm going to look to have something published, but it was really just my feelings and thoughts and emotional getting out on paper to release what was going on inside of myself. And I found myself at times writing poems that became lyrics related to my patients, right?
Mm.
And I had written a few years ago, I think it might have been shortly maybe before COVID, I wrote a poem called Don't Give Up. And that was to my patients. It was inspired by my patients. And it starts off, don't give up even though you want to, right? And then I ended up collaborating with a singer-songwriter and an animation artist. And then in December 2022, I think there was one or two songs in between that, but in December 2022, I read in the New York Times, because I'm originally from the East Coast, even though now I'm in Oregon, related to my daughter having a baby, so I moved. But I'm still a New York Times girl. So I was reading the paper, and sadly, I read in December 2022 of the death of Stephen Boss, whose other name was Twitch. And I did not know of him or follow him, but he was a celebrity and had worked with creatively with Ellen DeGeneres, and he was a dancer, and he was Dancing on the Stars, and he and his wife Allison Holker had a tremendous media following, and he died by suicide. And he appeared to be, and I'm sure he was at times, loving, full of life, charismatic. I mean, he came across as an amazing human being. And I think that feel of him came through in the obituary. That even though I never knew him, I never watched him, I felt his loss. And I wrote a poem called Heartbreak Times Infinity, and related to his death. And I was thinking, heartbreak times infinity, the enormity of the heartbreak. And the first one in the poem that became the lyric was the heartbreak that your very own mind is trying to kill you by what it's telling you. And I could identify with this because when I was a medical student, I too had attempted suicide. And it's lucky that I survived that because my intention was to be dead. And so the first is that your very own mind is giving you thoughts to kill yourself. Then you act on the thoughts. Then there's the loved ones left behind, and then they're at increased risk of suicide. And so in the poem lyric, there was a repeated refrain that was, but hold on, your thoughts are all mixed up, right? And the idea that the pain is going to pass and it's not going to last. So you have to hold on. And at the end of the poem itself, it's really begging the person, please don't do it, reach out for help. What happened with that, so there was the poem, and then I reached out again on Upwork to find a singer-songwriter, and I collaborated with a young man named Shan Carvalho, and he created off of the poem, using my words, not the entire poem, but a major section, created the Hold On song. And later, I did not know this originally, Ginger, but Shan himself had been suicidal in the past, right? And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, so he could feel this deeply.
Hmm.
Then what happened was it became a well, there was an animation. The background of it is animated in terms of moving colors.
Hmm.
The lyric video, and it included the 988 number. And that song, the song and the video, the lyrics, it started to win awards. I would submit on Film Freeway to film contests. So what happened was, I heard that it had won an award in Paris. It hadn't won like a best lyrics or best original song, and many of my other songs have, but I was thrilled because it won a gold award at I think it was the Paris Film Awards. So I was super excited about, oh my God, the song won an award, right? But then
Hmm.
at the very same time, I was feeling really terrible because the purpose of the song was not to win an award. The purpose of the song was for people to listen to it, for it to be on the radio, social media, posted on websites. And that was such a challenge. I felt like I can't even get the person next door to listen to the song, but
Hmm.
somebody in Paris is giving it an award. So I went to sleep that night really feeling terrible. But I must have been, I don't know, visited in my dreams by, by God or whatever, because
Yeah.
when I woke up in the morning, I was energized. And that's how the Hold On campaign began,
Oh,
where it
wow.
was like, okay, it's not working one way, I'm going to try another way. I want to start the Hold On campaign. So fast forwarding to how you and I met was, I think it was, no, the Hold On song and all that was December 2022. So now
Hmm.
fast forward to December 2023, and I'm listening, not listening, I'm reading the New York Times again. And in December, they start to have obituaries for the year. And I read the obituary of a woman named Esra Mohawk. And Esra Mohawk was a very accomplished singer-songwriter, and she had done the song Stronger Than the Wind. That was her song. And
Wow.
Tina Turner, who had died in 2023, had performed Stronger Than the Wind. And I knew of the song through Tina Turner and had always really liked that song. So when I'm reading about Esra and thinking about Tina, I started to watch those videos of Esra performing her own song and then
Yeah.
Tina Turner's rendition of it. And I have to say that Tina Turner herself had attempted suicide when she was married to Ike, her abusive husband, and she was hospitalized during that suicide attempt.
Mm.
And very sadly, Tina Turner's adult son died by suicide. So I'm watching Stronger Than the Wind, and then I started thinking about the lyric. And I wasn't so much thinking about suicide. I was just thinking about the lyric and the loss of these two very talented women. And I started thinking, well, when you're alive, I guess you have to be stronger than the wind, metaphorically speaking, because life knocks you down and you have to get up
Hmm.
again. And then I was thinking, but when you die, like, is there an afterlife? Is there not an afterlife? And Do you still have to be stronger than the wind, you know, when you're dead?
Yeah.
And then and I was asking myself that question over and over again. And then I thought, well, if there is an afterlife, the answer would be, I think, no, because you become the wind. You are the wind,
Mm.
right? In terms of even the word spirit, right? We're part of the lyric where spirits live and breathe, right?
Yeah.
Right? And you must be the wind. And then the song, as you know, because you became the singer-songwriter, the song is repeatedly asking the question, where you go, my lovely, where you go, my darling. Like, are you in the nevermore or are
Hmm.
you in the forevermore? And how lost the person is feeling, missing them and questioning even the idea of where are they? And then it's repeated two more times, and the answer is coming to the person about being the wind. And
Yeah.
the very end of the song, I think, is beautiful because it's saying, where are you, my lovely, my darling? All questions will be answered when we meet again, when we meet again. Until then, I'll feel your love in the wind. So I had written that, again, inspired by that song and the lives of these two women, and sent it to you. So I'd like you, if you could, to start off, if you can remember, right? Because it goes back to what, 2020, end of 2022 or early 2023, when I reached out to you, and I had reached out to you saying, please take a look at this lyric,
Yeah.
right? And see if you'd like to submit something. So share, if you can recall, what it was like when you read that, and what it's like to come up with a lyric, and what it's like not to come up with the lyric, but how you as a vocalist express it and how you come up with a melody.
Yeah. So when I make music, I always my goal is to create something that is good for people, like music that is, nourishes someone is a word that we always use. And so when I read your lyrics, I was like, wow, this would be wonderful to be a part of a project that was, beneficial for people and, touched people in a deep way. So I immediately was like, I definitely want to work on this song. So when I read the lyrics, I knew sort of what kind of emotion I wanted. Something, of course, somber but not sad. Something that is exactly that. And so when I'm making a melody, and I haven't written the lyrics, usually I don't really know where the melody comes from. Honestly, it just kind of comes from the air. I don't know where. And for chords, usually I just try to create something. If I want it sad, I'll add some minor chords, and of course, a slower feel, slower rhythm, and whatnot. So yeah, I was just really excited to be a part of a project that was going to touch people and be good for people.
And I remember, as I said, when I first wrote it, it was not around suicide.
Hmm.
However, after writing it, I wanted to dedicate it to suicide loss survivors.
Mm.
And I also thought of the phrase, or in the sense, what it means is for all who love and will one day grieve, right?
Yeah.
Because I guess I don't even know if the right word is price, but it's sort of like the price of love is grief, right? Or to be alive also means we're going to die, right? So it's
Hmm.
sort of both sides of the coin, which make a whole. Right? So it did become around suicide loss, although I think the song speaks to everyone. The song itself, the lyric, does not specify anything around suicide.
Hmm.
Right? So that song, right, and your beautiful lyric and your beautiful singing, and then the lyric video, which I had found a beautiful image of like a garden and with a few flowers in it. And it ended up being animated by Lucia Martinez Rojas, who's a creative collaborator with me of many of our music videos. And the image the animation is that you're seeing it up close initially, and as the song progresses, it's like that image is becoming a little bit more and more in the distance. It doesn't become far away, but it's
Mm.
like you see a larger picture of it
Yeah.
as the song progresses. So the song has won all sorts of awards. It's won, and I'd have to refer to the Hold On campaign to remember which particular awards that it won. But it's won Best Original Song. I think it won at the International Songwriters Day contest,
Mm.
either the best song or the best lyric. Round the Globe festival, again, either the lyric or the song. And so people have been very moved, by the song. And then I've been in touch with you, of course, like, hey, the song has won these awards, right?
Yeah, it's always exciting to
Um,
hear.
yes. And and then you shared with me some very, very personal news. And could you say something
Sure.
about
Yeah.
that?
I've been very open about it and it's helped a lot, honestly. Because, when you're open, you can actually talk to people and then they can share if they've experienced something similar. So it opens that door of conversation. I was visiting here in South Carolina. That's where I'm at now. I've since moved to New York, but I was visiting South Carolina over Thanksgiving break, and then my dad committed suicide at that time. And so it was just it was something that we were all sort of knew might happen one day, but like of course nothing can prepare you for experiencing something like that. And so I've just been talking a lot about it, and I've told most people I work with because I feel like it's just best to be open about things. And it's just, when I was working on these songs with you, I had never been like a survivor of someone doing that, but I don't know, I've always just been not fascinated, but I've always just been like deeply affected by hearing when someone does something like that because I have some distant friends and relatives who have done things like this, but nothing close in my family. And so, like I said, nothing can really prepare you for that. And I wrote a song about it, which really helped, that I'm releasing, I think at the sometime in March. And I wrote a song with my brother about our experiences and just what we were experiencing and feelings we had, because he's also a songwriter, but more for himself. And so that was a really great bonding moment. And having music in my life has been a huge help because it just helps express the feelings I have. And it sort of turned such a horrible situation into something positive. The song that I wrote has really touched a lot of people. I play it live, and my goal when I play it, I was on stage the other day and I was about to play it, and I kind of asked myself, like, I don't really know why I keep playing this song because I don't want to bring people down, because that's no one wants to feel that when they go see a live show. But I was playing it, and halfway through I stopped and I was like, I just realized why I like playing this song. It's because I hope to encourage people and remind people, it's really important to just cherish those in your life while you can, and to, let go of any problems that aren't really significant, and to just, love people, love openly, just be open with people and appreciate people while you can. And yeah, that's like, like I said earlier, my goal is to create music that helps people and nourishes them and makes them feel good. And so, with this song, my hope is just to remind people, cherish those in your life while you can. And, experiencing something like this has also put a lot of my silly little problems that I obsess over, it's put them all into perspective. And it's just, I wouldn't say it's made me like, I wouldn't say it's made my life better experiencing something like this, but it's definitely, put a lot of things into perspective.
And if you'd like, Ginger, on the Hold On campaign Facebook page, we could post your song, your and your
Oh yeah,
brother's
that
song.
would be
So
wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah,
so just
it'll be
just let me
released
know, right? We'll do
next
that.
month, sometime next
Yeah.
month.
Um, in terms of your father, um, and again, share what you want and
Sure.
don't share
I'm
what
honestly an
you
open
don't
book.
want. Yeah. Was there a mental health history? Um, any sort of alcohol or
Mm,
other substances, or was there any warning of? And again,
sure.
a person does not have to have a diagnosed psychiatric illness to
Hmm.
have life problems beset them, right?
Yeah.
And in a moment of despair end their life. But what was a bit of the story of your dad? And you said that, I think you said earlier that there might have been some suspicion something like this could happen. So what
Yes.
was that his story as you understood it?
Sure. So on my mom's side, there's a lot of mental illness. But on my dad's side, there really no. I don't think anyone's been diagnosed. Everyone has some crazy stories from their childhood. There's definitely a few crazy stories.
Mhm.
Um, but he was never diagnosed with anything. Although we all knew he was just overall sort of a depressed person, especially in the last 10 years. Um, for sake of like my brothers and sisters, I won't talk about substances and specifics with that. But he drank some. He was never really drank a lot, but definitely
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
he wasn't clear headed as someone who does nothing. And so I think that alcohol is a depressant that probably contributed in a lot of ways. And substances, they affect your view on life and they affect your brain. And I definitely feel like if there was no drinking and no substances, it probably would have been a lot easier for him to get through the depression. And so, you know, that's we always knew something like that would happen, possibly as a possibility. And I think that one of the biggest problems was he just felt a lack of purpose. He even like he was very open about that. And so, I recently, coincidentally, I started reading the book A Man's Search for Meaning. Have you ever heard of
Yes,
it's
Viktor Frankl. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Hmm.
wonderful book. I'm reading it again because there's so many concepts that like I couldn't grasp the first read. But I don't even remember why I started reading the book. I thought my friend recommended it, which isn't even the case. She's like, no, that wasn't me. So it's kind of a coincidence. And they talk about suicide, and they say that like it's a man's experience after being in four different concentration camps during the Holocaust. And he was a psychologist, right? Psychologist,
I know he
something.
was a mental health professional. I don't remember.
Something like that, yeah. And so it was a mental health professional's like view of being in having those experiences and seeing why some people died and how a lot of people who died in the camps were people who just didn't have a meaning to live anymore. They sort of gave up. And so I feel like a lot of, at least with my father's experience, like it was just lack of purpose, lack of meaning. And I don't, I guess that I've heard that like as society progresses, like we have lack of meaning even more. It's more prevalent, and I think suicide has gone up as well. And so I don't even know what the solution to that would be. But that was definitely, even more so than anything else, I think one of the biggest reasons that it happened.
When you said that he was, quote, depressed,
Hmm.
or he appeared to be depressed,
Yeah.
um, what was it? Because that can what kind of symptoms or behaviors were you and your, I don't know, your siblings or your mom,
Hmm.
witnessing?
I don't think we all really knew why. I mean, it was in the last year, the last few years, that it just sort of went downhill more and more. Um, I know finances were definitely a part of it. It's hard to make money. He was an entrepreneur. He just seemed to lack motivation to go out and make money because that's what he always did. He was an entrepreneur. And so I don't really know if what caused it. It was lack of motivation, lack of drive, lack
So
of
he
purpose.
was he was demonstrating or showing um, what he was less motivated to do things.
Yeah, and I think possibly it's just age. We had all grown up and we didn't really need him anymore because, we're adults now. And so, he didn't have um, we didn't really gather that much. And when I recently moved to New York, and I have been around a lot of families and who gather and like make a point to prioritize family. And it's just very different from what I come from. I think with there being a lot of mental illness, there's just a lot of like issues within the family. And so there's not that like foundation of family. And I think maybe that was part of it too, lack of purpose from us. We didn't need him anymore or whatever. So that might have, yeah.
Um, Sometimes a person, in terms of having depressive symptoms, um, could have change in their sleep pattern.
He
The
definitely
person,
struggled with sleep. Like for
sometimes,
years.
yeah. So
Hmm.
sometimes with depression, a person could be they're having trouble falling asleep. They're waking up in the middle of the night, right? They don't feel rested, whatever amount of sleep they're getting. Also, a person could have the opposite, where now they're feeling exhausted and they're
Mm,
taking naps during the day and sleeping too much at night and
yeah.
not wanting to get out of bed in the morning because they're still tired and they're sleeping. What change in sleep did your dad show?
He just had a very hard time falling asleep. And then he would wake up in the middle of the night and couldn't fall back asleep. And so he just, I know personally how much that like affects me if I don't sleep well. And
Absolutely.
I feel like a different person. Like when I was living in Cape Town, I had a very odd sleep schedule. And I really didn't feel like the same person living in Cape Town. I came back to the US, I got on a normal sleep schedule. I started eating healthier, and I started like taking vitamins and stuff, and I feel like a different person. So that all
And
definitely
chronic
affects me.
sleep problems can be so debilitating.
Yes, it's
Debilitating
frustrating.
physically because our body needs rest, right?
Hmm.
And our mind needs rest too, right? Because it's almost processing those thoughts or digesting those thoughts in your mind.
Yes.
And then emotionally, it can be exhausting too, because it becomes like, oh, am I going to be able to fall asleep tonight? No, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep. Right. So
Hmm.
it just adds to that distress. Sometimes a person who's experiencing depression, they have a change in their appetite. Again, it can go both ways. The person can lose their appetite, and now
Hmm.
they're not eating, they're not nourishing their body, they're
Yeah.
feeling weak, but they don't want to eat. They've lost their appetite. Other
Hmm.
people might be eating too much. Was there any change in his eating habits?
I think he always sort of struggled with weight, and like there was a couple times throughout my life that he was like a good weight and he would run and stuff and exercise and bike. But again, like lack of motivation, he didn't really bike and run the way he used to because he was old. He was 64, 65, and so it's, I guess, harder to exercise at that point anyways. And he, possibly, I don't really know if this is how he felt, but possibly had gained some weight and like didn't feel good about that and about himself and whatnot. So that might have also contributed to some of it as well.
Then there can also be um, decrease in interest. So the person may have, I'll make this up, talking about music, maybe they used to play the piano, right? Or they
Hmm.
would want to go to concerts, or they had an interest, but now they're just not doing it anymore, right?
Yeah.
And did that show itself with him?
I would say yes. My dad was always really interested in starting businesses and growing a business. He had multiple 10 or more businesses throughout his whole
What
life.
kind of businesses did your dad do?
So he had a candle company. He was a photographer, which he didn't do anymore. Really great photographer. And he would sell us photographs, and he made t-shirts for a while, and he sold kites he lives in Oregon actually. And in Bend, Oregon was his kite store. When he was like 21, opened a kite store. And so things like that. He had a yo-yo business. Like he would get on trends, like when yo-yos were trending, and then he would get super interested in those businesses, figure out how to make a super profitable business model, and then start selling it and make a lot of money. Then he would get bored with it. He'd start on another one, start on the next trend. And we were all kind of like seeing that he didn't really do that anymore. He just like apathetic, had apathy. We were all like, why don't you just get back into a business? Like it would help you, it would get you out of the house, it would make you money, like it would be great. But you can't make someone do something like that. That was definitely really frustrating for me and probably like my other siblings too.
Sort of like, why can't you just do it?
Right. Like just you know, try.
I think that's what's so painful, sad,
Hmm.
tragic about depression because it's happening on the inside, right? And it's invisible. It can be invisible. It can be invisible to those around us. It can even be invisible, I think, to the person that's experiencing it, right?
Mm,
Because, and again, I'm not saying this about your father at
sure.
all, right? Because I didn't know your dad. But a person could start to think, well, that's just me. I'm just not, I'm just not interested anymore, right?
Hmm.
You start to believe that, well, that's just me. My appetite, well, I'm not hungry. Going out, well, I just don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to recognize, wait a minute, I used to be able to be interested and to do these things. Maybe there's something else going on. That's why I think what you said earlier about opening up the conversation about mental health is so important, because in thinking about, well, that's just me, right? Like, I'm not interested in planning for the future anymore, right? Or I don't really see a future. I don't see a purpose. That these could all potentially be related to having an illness called depression,
Yeah.
right? Because we talk about, it's interesting, we talk about mental health almost as if mental health is different than physical health. Mental health, our brain is part of our body, right?
Yeah.
And if the illness is, let's say there's potentially no external factor where somebody would go, well, if I were in that situation, I feel depressed too, right?
Yeah.
But there are plenty of people in certain situations, they're not becoming depressed. So it's not necessarily an external cause. But
Yeah.
whatever's going on, there are changes going on in our brain. Right? So I want to give like a strong shout out to everyone that if one is feeling lack of energy, right, no motivation, decrease in interest, feeling despairing, not interacting as much socially, trouble sleeping, eating, thoughts of death, suicide, that is not just you having a bad day, that it's important to share that with a trusted family member, go to your
Yeah.
primary care doctor, seek out a therapist,
Mhm.
because in my thinking, until you've excluded everything else, right, don't just think, well, this is me, because it's not, right?
Mhm.
And depression can become progressive, right?
Yeah.
That it can go on, and then I've done some reading on this, that in having suicidal thoughts, it could be 30 minutes of having the thought to even 10 minutes of having the thought, that the thought can turn to action,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And having access to lethal means becomes so dangerous,
Yeah.
right? Because if one did not have access to it, then that whole idea of hold on, don't give up, reach out for help, hold on, don't act on it. You're not. If you have act, if I had, I truly believe that when I was in my late 20s and had become depressed and suicidal,
Mhm.
if I had a gun, I really believe I would have shot myself.
Mhm.
Um, thank God I didn't have a weapon, right?
Yeah.
In Oregon in 2022, suicide was our 10th leading cause of death. In 2023, it's the 8th leading cause of death.
Wow.
And 57%, and I think this goes back to maybe the 2022 statistics, 50% of the suicides were by guns.
Mm. It's
So
it's yeah. It's unfortunate because it's such a quick way to do it. So you don't ever get to change your mind, you know.
yeah, yes. And in the event that your use of that weapon did not end your life, there are people, and I'm thinking of a particular young woman that I had read of, where she ended up paralyzed, related, to
Mm.
what she had done. And then you think of the tragedies of a family who did not secure the weapon, where their adolescent or even preteen got hold of the gun
Mhm.
and ended their life. It's
Yeah.
just,
It's crazy. It's I don't know. Like I don't Because in other countries it's not like this. So it's like, is it like, it's clearly not the fault of a gun. It's clearly the decision of going to the gun. And it's like, what even, like, what frustrates me or not frustrates me, or what makes me, what I ponder is, how do you just change people's minds? Like, how do you just make them like, why is it in the America that it's, I would, yeah, it's
Well,
crazy.
it is in a sense,
Hmm.
because I'm thinking, um, it can be what? It ought to be such a simple thing to lock up the weapon,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I know that there have been campaigns of giving out lock boxes. I'm thinking too that maybe it also has to do with a fear of talking about um, untoward events with weapons, right?
Hmm.
Or we don't like to talk about suicide, right?
Yeah,
As you
I
said, it's kind of a
definitely,
down topic,
yeah,
right?
like I almost feel bad talking about it with people. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I just like totally bring this person down? But it's like, it helps me, so I kind of am being selfish in a way, but it's actually better overall because it's making me feel better. Also, no one wants me just moping around to myself and feeling depressed. So definitely, I feel like the openness of the conversation has been very helpful to me.
Mhm.
I can't say it's been good for the people around me, but it's been helpful to me to just talk about it. And even now, like, I'm not sitting in my room crying right now. I'm talking about and it
Yeah.
helps. It helps a lot.
Yeah, I think too, Ginger, and maybe you could also reflect on this, that one can think, well, suicide, that would never happen to me.
Hmm.
Suicide, that would never happen to my parents or my siblings.
Hmm.
And suicide, it's never going to happen to my child, right?
Yeah.
And yet, suicide is one of the leading causes of death in the United States,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's the number two cause of death for young people,
That's
right?
the
And
part
I'm
that
thinking
is.
with college age students, it's the number two leading cause of death. For the highest rate of suicide has to do with elderly white men, right? There's increased risk of suicide with Alaskan Natives and Native Americans, African American, LGBTQ community,
Hmm.
those who have been cyber bullied, right?
Hmm.
That it's almost that there's cognitive dissonance, like we can't hold it in our mind. Like
Hmm.
we can hear like it's one of the leading causes of death, right? It was, I think we're talking about, maybe it's 2022 statistics or maybe it's 2023, but
Hmm.
it's in the United States, 11th leading cause of death. That's the most recent statistics, 11th leading cause of death.
Hmm.
So here we know 11th leading cause of death, and yet the idea of, well, it can't happen to me, it's going to happen to somebody else. I think
Hmm.
without becoming frightened of this, right, but just becoming aware, right,
Yeah.
that this type of death can be common. And
Yeah.
and it could be that most people know someone who died by suicide, let
Hmm.
alone the most recent statistics were, let me see if I get the number right. I think it was 1.6 million suicide attempts.
Hmm.
So on the one hand, we're talking about suicide deaths, but there were so many suicide attempts, right, in the
Yeah.
United States, that I think we need to be able to hold these thoughts in our head together, because that's going to help us make better decisions,
Yeah.
right?
It's just the reality of it. Like, wrapping your mind around that. That is the reality of our youth, our people. You know. And my personal opinion, like, I don't know if I'm right. It's just something I've been thinking about. Is I just feel like a lot of the modern like what people talk about nowadays is like chasing happiness, just try to be happy, do what makes you happy. Me, it's all about me, finding my happiness, finding what's right for me. And I just feel like that really isolates you from like thinking about other people and giving back to people and sharing your sharing the things that are making you unhappy with other people, because you don't want to bring them down. And like, one of the problems that I think my dad had is he had, zero friends. He didn't have one friend. And that would mean that he doesn't really have anyone to like share his issues with. And because sometimes when you share your problems with a friend, you're like, I'm really overreacting, like this is not even that big of a deal. And so I personally, I grew up without any friends, and so it was just the way my life was. I was like, I dropped out of high school, so I didn't have any high school friends. And I just did music, music, music. It was like my life. And moving up to New York, I've gotten a lot of friends recently. And I just feel like it's helped me to just, share my problems and take the time to be open and realize that if you have a friend, they actually do want to hear your problems and offer help or just be there to be there for you. So I feel like that, and that's community. And so I feel like community is a huge part of just feeling good. Um, and not to bash the internet, but I feel like the internet just sort of makes the internet isn't a platform where you like share your problems and get help from people. It's a platform where you just kind of like show how good your life is going and share cool moments. And if someone's depressed and they go on the internet, it just is a bunch of people talking about how good their life is going, and all those kinds of things. And so like I feel like it's just not really in the culture anymore to talk about your problems and have a chat and just be open. And I feel like that would help a lot of people, is just being open and having friends. And it's hard to make friends nowadays. It's where do you make a friend, If I wasn't working with people in the industry in New York and I just moved there on my own, I don't know where I would make friends. So yeah, community, I just feel like it's not really as good as it could be, especially in the US.
Interesting. I'm thinking that we're so connected with our cell phones now, right? Like
Hmm.
texting, et cetera. But to actually go up to a real person to say hello, right, in real life,
Right.
that seems more difficult to do.
Yeah, to say like, hello, hey friend, I'm actually not feeling that great today. Like, can I just talk about it or just like share it? That's like really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think maybe it was the prior Surgeon General of the United States declared that there was an epidemic of loneliness in the United
Yes.
States.
Because which is unbelievable because there's so many ways to meet people online, but it's, when you're in person with people, as someone who's a little introverted, I can say, you open yourself up to rejection, to someone disliking what you're saying, and then you have to be in the present moment with them and deal with it. Like you can't just hang up on them. You have to be there with them. It opens you up to a lot of possible negativities. Whereas if you're texting with someone, or if you're, like on a video call with someone, you just hang up and like act like it didn't happen and move on with your day, instead of talking it out and like creating. And when you move through conflicts with people, like you're getting even closer with them if you can successfully move through it. And yeah, the other thing is the way we just chase happiness. I feel like it's not, I feel like the goal is for everyone to be happy, when in reality it's totally fine to just say like, I'm not feeling good today. And it's actually not that big of a deal. Because in a way, I feel like people hyper focus on the fact that they're not happy that day, which can be like a cycle. Because then you're not happy, you're thinking about it. Then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not happy. And you're verbalizing the fact that you're not happy. And then you fixate on it. And then you're making it a bigger deal than it actually is. Whereas if you realize, I'm not okay today, and it'll pass, at some point, and just kind of like move on. And instead of, because a man's search for meaning, they sort of go over this, like instead of giving whatever you're fixating power, just realize it and say it's, realize that it's actually not that big of a deal and it's temporary, which is a lot easier said than done as well.
Yeah, but it's almost accepting that, like, okay, it's true, I'm not feeling okay right now.
Yeah, like it's
And
completely
that
fine
doesn't
to.
mean I'm not going to feel better in a few moments or a few hours or by the next day.
But you will eventually, like even on my dad's song, I have the lyrics pulled up. I said like, like the sun surely eventually shows if you sit tight through the night. Like the sun will come up again. The times will get better. Nothing is constant. Life is not constant. It's always changing, ebbing and flowing. So even for someone who's completely happy, there's going to be some things in his life or her life that go bad. And, you know,
Yes, it's
it
guaranteed.
it's just a part of life. Like life really isn't pure joy and happiness. It's not. And to think that and to strive for that is almost like an unrealistic expectation that I feel like a lot of people nowadays are striving for. Like someone like, for instance, Nelson Mandela, he was in prison for what, 27 years, came out still alive. You know, the guy, A Man's Search for Meaning, what was his name again?
Frankl,
Sorry?
Viktor Frankl.
Victor. Yeah, Victor had this horrible experience for four different concentration camps, and he came out alive and, you know, came out alive.
And I think, was it his wife and children? There, quite a number of his family were killed in the Holocaust too.
It was either him or I think his close friend, where the wife and children were gone.
I'm thinking too about, the mind when we become depressed or suicidal, that the thinking capacity of working through the problem is not there, right? So the
Yeah.
person is feeling such emotional pain, just filled with that pain, and are not able, and part of that is because they're not interacting with others, right?
hmm
Or they haven't reached out to others for help, or possibly they've reached out, but people are not being helpful to them.
hmm
But meanwhile, the suicidal person's thinking has become so constricted that they're not able to think of other options of what I can do, right?
hmm
So it can seem to them, well, the only solution to be out of this pain is to kill myself, right?
Yeah.
Whereas that should not be an option, and it certainly is not the only option, because there's a whole host of things that could be done, right?
Yeah.
Even if it means just to be able, with someone who cares about you, to be with you, to sit with you through that pain. Because as you said, things are going to change, right?
Yeah.
But I want to bring this up because I think sometimes after there's been a suicide death, the survivors can start to think, well, why didn't they reach out for help? Like, what, I'm here. I
Yeah.
love them, right? I'm here to help. Why didn't they call 988? Why didn't they just, I don't know, take a walk, listen to music, take a nap, right?
Yeah.
Why did they do what they did? I believe that a big part of that explanation is that their mind was not, they were not thinking clearly,
Yeah.
right? At all. And that was part of the, cognitive thinking impact of having this mental health distress slash illness at that
hmm
time. I can think of a mental health colleague of mine. Her name is Stacy. She was a nurse practitioner. She and I had worked at the same mental health program in Oregon when I
hmm
first came here. And then I had left that organization. I'd gone to another organization. One day I'm looking on Facebook and I see that she died. And she was a young woman. She was 48. Um, she had two sets of young twins. And it was shocking that she was dead.
mm
And I contacted a mutual friend who also had worked at that organization and found out that she developed a severe depression, unable to work. I mean, a whole host of things had happened. And she ended up in a very dramatic, I'm not going to say how she did it, but in a
hmm
terrible way, intentionally, she ended her life, leaving behind two sets of young twins.
mm
And in learning of this, I just felt that her illness, and in her case, there was a psychiatric illness going on,
hmm
that it had devoured her. I felt it was a cancer that had destroyed her mind,
Yeah.
because never in a million years would Stacy have done that if she
Mhm.
were in her right state of mind.
Yeah.
Right? So just so terrible. I wanted to ask you, also, sometimes when a person is in a suicidal state of mind, um, they might start giving things away, or their conversation starts to be on, I don't know, a bit of a morbid side.
Well,
Was there any of that going on with your dad?
so one instance is he gave me and my little brother some old photos. And I was like, why are you giving them to me? Like, just keep them at your house. Why do we need these photos? We can go look at them at your house. And that was probably back in May or June. So that was a while ago. But I just remember thinking, like, that's really odd that he would do that. And I haven't really been here for him to give anything to me. I've been up in New York a lot the last year. And so I can't really speak about anything else. But I mean, like I said, we all sort of knew something like this would happen because he was vocal about the fact that he didn't want to be alive anymore. And he just, he's always used to joke, I just hope cancer gets me at some point. Like, just don't want to be around anymore, because life is hard. You have to, uh, you know, push through the wind. And if you don't want to do that anymore, it's hard to just be here and go through the life's problems without the motivation to deal with them. And so he was very vocal about it and vocal about the fact that he, you know, doesn't want to be here anymore. And I think he maybe just I think he's been thinking of that probably a lot in the last 10 years, even, and maybe just waited until all of his kids were old and didn't need him anymore. So, it wasn't a big surprise, but like I said, you can't ever prepare for it. But he was definitely spoke about things like that. Yeah.
Um, Going back, also the idea of communication around suicidality.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes people think that, well, I can't ask somebody, are you thinking about hurting yourself, or have you thought about suicide, because, or ending your life, that we can worry like, oh, if I bring that up, right, are they going to be mad at me for saying that, because they don't, for whatever reason, now they're
Mad
angry
that
at
we're
me,
assuming that.
and now that we're not going to have a connection with each other. Or
Yeah.
if I bring it up, I'm going to plant the idea in their head. So I better not say anything about what I'm wondering about.
Yeah.
And there's been plenty of research and advocacy to say that there's no danger in saying to someone, I care about you. Are you thinking in any way of hurting yourself, ending your life, killing yourself, right? What
Hmm.
about that gun you own? Is it safely secured, or can you get that gun out of the house?
Yeah.
Um, did you, or any family member, and I want to say that we can ask somebody, right, about what they're thinking. They may or may not respond with the truth, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
if we hadn't asked them, we're in no way responsible for their dying, because that's ultimately their own action and behavior. But
Yeah.
did it ever come across in your family that people were asking your dad about, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself?
I don't know if anyone specifically asked him because I think we all knew that it's kind of what he was thinking. Like he always would say he would never do that because of us kids. He had five
Uh,
kids, and I have a younger brother, but all the other three kids are much older, and so we were always like the reason he wouldn't do something like that. So we never asked, or I never asked, because I already knew the answer. He would do that unless except for us kids, which is what surprised me is because he would always say that. That's one of the reasons I was kind of surprised when it happened. But um, so yeah, like I don't know if that happens often where someone already is very vocal about it, and all of us really tried different things to help him and make his life easier, and you know just help him out any way we could. But I think in a way he felt like a burden. We all wonder why.
yes, that you're right. That thought of being a burden to others. And sometimes it could even be, um, I'm a burden to them, and it's an act of love to them for me to end my life.
That's, I think, a lot of how he felt, and all of us were very confused, thinking we didn't think you were a burden at all. And honestly, as someone, I have, clearly I have mental uh instability on both sides of my family. As someone who comes from it, sometimes not really anymore, but every once in a while it'll come up to where when I voice my problems, I'm like, oh, I don't want to bring the person down, or like, oh, I don't want to be a burden on someone. But I've sort of, honestly, I've taken it upon myself to do some research about friends and relationships, because I just wasn't taught that as a kid. And I realized that, when you ask a friend for help, it actually makes them feel good because they can help you. People actually enjoy helping you. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel needed. It makes them feel, um, like they contributed to your life in some way. And so, learning that has actually helped me deal with people and, make relationships and be open about my problems. People enjoy when you share it brings you closer. I can honestly say that the friends that I share my problems with, and 100% transparency, are, believe it or not, my closest friends. They just has
Yes.
turned into a close relationship.
I'm so glad you're saying this. And I think it's that authenticity, because we can have friendships, but, and I know it can be hard to do, but if we're not sharing our real self,
It's
being
actually quite
authentic,
selfish because they're not
yeah,
getting to
like,
know us.
yeah, like, is that, am I being a friend to my friend if I'm hiding what's really going on with me?
hmm I mean, is it really helpful if you're constantly happy and have no problems to your friend? No, it's not
I
helpful. It actually is.
know.
Do you really want to create these unrealistic expectations for your friends? It's you don't want to constantly talk about your problems all the time, but it really does build stronger relationships to share those problems.
Guess what is it with the marriage vow? For better and worse?
For
It
better,
doesn't
for
say
worse.
just for better and better, right?
Exactly. Life happens. There are problems that come up. Sometimes you can deal with them. Sometimes you just have to go through them without dealing with them. And they pass. Usually a problem will pass. And if it can't, then, you know, you just kind of have to deal with it. Like life sometimes isn't all peaches and cream.
And sometimes the way we think it will get helped, maybe we need to try another form of help, right? Or another person or another
hmm
avenue, right? Where,
Yeah.
what do they say? Where there's life, there's hope. And I absolutely believe that. But
Yeah.
again, part of it is to be able to reach out for that help, to accept that help without feeling awful, like, oh my goodness, I need help. I mean, I'm a strong advocate, like, to receive help is good. To give help is
hmm
strength, and to receive help is strength. I
Yeah.
wanted to shift it a little bit to ask you, sometimes people that come to know that there's been a suicide death, that they may say something to us, right, as a suicide loss survivor, right?
hmm
So for myself, I'm a suicide loss survivor in terms of when I had been married, my father in law died by suicide.
hmm
My friend, whom I mentioned to you, died by suicide. And I have a teenage patient and an adult patient who died by suicide. So, as a suicide loss survivor, sometimes a person could say something to me. They're wanting to be helpful, but possibly the way they're saying it is not helpful at all.
hmm
So, I wanted to ask you, have you had any experience with people saying things to you that was helpful to you, or things that people might have said or done that was unhelpful to you?
Um, the first thing that pops into my mind is I have a close friend whose sister committed suicide about 4 years ago, and I can't even imagine, it being a sibling where it happens. And she, as someone who's gone through this, said, just like do what you need to do to get through this. Like if you like, she just said that she used to do things in life that she didn't actually want to do, And now she's sort of taken the approach that if she doesn't want to do something, she just doesn't do it. Like it's, it's not a big deal. And I think she's just, sort of given, like, it sort of gave me the permission to say, look, I'm just not really feeling great today. Like I don't want to work on this project right now. And like it's okay. Like I just realized like it is a kind of a lot to go through. And so just giving me the permission to let myself slack off with some things, whether it be exercise or whatnot. Like it's still important to make sure you're exercising, make sure you're working, make sure you're, getting through your normal routine. But it's also okay to say, like, I think I would feel better if I just sat and watched Friends for like an hour and just sort of gave myself that time. Another thing I can't remember if I read this somewhere or not, but to, our internal dialogues are very powerful. And sometimes, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, I'm very hard on myself. And what I read or whatever, I can't remember, was, talk to yourself as if you're talking to your best friend. Would you say that to your best friend? Or would you say, just take it easy today? Like it's okay. It's
Yeah.
it's totally okay. And so I feel like my internal dialogue has just become much nicer and it's really helped me. So those are two things that have really helped me. Um, as as far as things that have hurt me, um, I haven't really. Well, like for full transparency, there was one person in my family who said that something about the fact that like my dad didn't like himself and he probably like this is what he wanted, and it was a very harsh way it was worded, and I was like, this was the day it happened, I think, or the day after, and I was like, you know just I just wish, to this person I was like, I just wish you just realize that like at this time it's not really the thing to say. And I was really upset. I don't really get angry, and I was very angry, and it was hurtful. And with that person now, they're also going through the loss, and it's actually, I think, brought us a little closer together to be going through this experience and to realize, life is short. We are very different, and this person is often really annoying. A lot of people can agree, but like I said, life is short, and a lot of the problems and little things that annoy us about others, it's not even really that big of a deal. Um, so yeah, this whole thing has definitely taught me to just appreciate the people in my life and just be grateful for those who are around me. And, you know, a lot of our problems aren't really as big as we think they are.
And going back to what you said about friendship and reaching out and sharing what's going on, that the problem, what um, can maybe go, can get, not that it gets smaller, but it's not as large when you share it with somebody else. Or at least
It's
now
not as
now
large
there's
for
two
sure, yeah.
people involved to look at this and try to figure it out.
Right,
Um,
right.
I was thinking of a parent I know, a mother whose son had died by suicide, and she shared with me that a very close friend of hers had said to her, had used the word selfish in describing the suicide death, that the son was selfish, and that so much hurt the mother,
Hmm.
in the sense that she did not in any way see what her son had done in his moments of extreme distress, so that ended up ending his life. But she did not see that as selfish, and it really broke the friendship with this other person. Can
Yeah,
can you
this,
speak to that idea that some people will say, well, that was selfish of the person to do?
well, so two things. My friend who sister did the same thing, her mom, who obviously lost a daughter to suicide, she really, oh sorry, this was actually a different friend who lost her father to suicide in the same way. She told me that just don't blame him. Like don't think it was a selfish thing for him to do. Don't blame him. Just basically, forgive, and it will just be a lot easier for you. And so of course I'm going to feel a little bit of anger towards my dad for doing something like this because it's upsetting. But I've tried to remember that, just don't be angry with him. Don't think it's a selfish thing for him to do, because it's not helpful to think like that. And the other person I was talking to, who told me that, the other person I was speaking of, that's brought us closer, she was saying that this was a selfless thing for him to do. And I was just, it was the same conversation when I was angry, and I was like just thinking, just please don't say that right now. Like, because I disagree. I don't think it was selfless. He was not a burden to us at all. It was actually felt good for us to help him. It gave us some sense of purpose. And so, but like I said, I've actually gotten closer with this person because she's also dealing with the same. She was close with him as well. And so we're all trying to deal with this together. And so, you know, it definitely isn't good to harbor anger. I could harbor anger to him. I could harbor anger to this person. But it's like, what do the hippies say? Love is the answer. Like, it really
Yeah.
has been helpful to just love deeper and love more openly. That's been like the most helpful thing for me. Openness, really.
If if you could, I don't know, wave a magic wand over someone, right? So there you are in shock and grief, right?
Mhm.
What would you have? What would you want someone to have said to you?
Um, I don't know if there's any specific thing someone could say, but when it happened, I was actually at Thanksgiving with 30 of the nicest people I've ever been around. And so the magic wand that I would hope for is that it happened in exactly the way that it did. Like, I just am so grateful. My sister had just pulled up when I got the news. Like, it was I just felt so loved in that moment. And so that's what I would wish for anyone, is just that you're around people when you hear about it that really care about you.
And and I would also add to that, and who continue to care about you.
Yeah, people have continued to check in on me, and it would be so easy for me to close those people out and not accept their help. But the openness that I've expressed, and that I've, in the way that I've been open, has just made it easier for me. I can't imagine if I was trying to go through this alone and I just wasn't talking about how I was feeling. And even when I landed, I was telling someone, I haven't been to South Carolina since this happened. I'm not really feeling that great, to be honest. And they said, "I'm so sorry," and I was like, well, I feel a little better talking about it. It's just helped so much.
What has this conversation been like for you? Because we touched on a lot of tender, real.
Yeah. It's my hope with conversations like these is always just to help someone who's either going through something similar, thinking about doing something like this. Even with music I write, I just always hope to make people feel better and make them maybe think about things differently. And it makes me feel good, especially going through something like this. It makes me feel good to maybe be helping someone. I don't really know, but I could be. If I wasn't talking about it, there's no way I could be. So,
And I'm
yeah,
sure, I know that what you have shared is going to help people, right?
that
Because
that makes me feel
you are
good.
speaking the truth. It's your
Thank you.
truth, but there's also a universal truth that you're speaking of, right? Don't
Thank you. Thank
don't
you.
don't don't go through your pain alone, right? Let people know what's going on and that
Hmm.
you're not a burden, right? And as I've been sharing too, that the reason why the thinking gets so constricted, right, and you're not thinking of other options, is related to being in what, a suicidal state of mind. And that's exactly the time that we need to reach out. There's a
Hmm.
phrase that I hope I get the phrase right, but someone had said something like, you know, um, like, don't kill yourself when you're feeling suicidal. Yeah, like that thing. Like, that's not the time. Don't ever do it, but please don't do it when you're having a suicidal thought,
Yeah.
right? I know that sounds kind of strange, but it's like, don't do it.
Just don't do
And we,
anything when you're feeling like that. Just pause.
yes,
Take a big pause.
pause, time and distance, right? That
Hmm.
things will get better You're not a burden. People care. Help is available. Hope is real. Lock up your gun.
Hmm.
Right? If you could say, if there were a person listening right now who's just feeling terrible, right? They're having the impulse or the plan to kill themselves.
Hmm.
What would you tell them?
I would just say that, my dad felt like a burden. My dad felt like it would be easier if he wasn't around. And that just, as someone who's left on earth without him and him doing that, that was not true at all. And, we would have been so happy to help. It would have actually been like, it would have made us feel great to see him wanting to get better and wanting to dig himself out of the hole he was in. And we would have been happy to help. And I think he felt really hopeless with his situation in life. But you know he had 5 children and only five, but he did have 5 people in his life that were, you know are sad that he's not around. It was not helpful for him to do this in any way, which is what he thought, I think.
I'm thinking too, as you were speaking, that maybe you'll have to tell me because you're of a younger generation than I am,
Sure.
but that men can be what is this a word? Enculturated, right? The idea of if I'm a man, right,
Hmm.
that it's weak to ask for help, right?
I
That I
Yeah.
have to pull up myself by my own bootstraps, and I can't. Um, that I will be a burden, or people are going to be, or are going to not think that I'm manly or masculine if I'm having a problem. And probably that's related to that there's more men that die by suicide than women, right?
Hmm.
It's still, although sadly, women are catching up, and they're especially catching up because of use of guns. But what do you
Yeah.
think of this whole idea of men who are not reaching out for help?
Well,
Because their idea of what a man
right.
is.
For my specific situation, one of the things my dad actually did is, I think the night before, he reached out to my brother asking for help. And my brother was very much like, "Yeah, I'll help you. You know, let's get better." And so he did reach out for help the day before. Um but he never did at any other time. And maybe if he reached out sooner, it would have been easier for him to get through what he was getting through, get out of the depression. And I have never really had a lot of friends before, so I can't really say if it's more difficult for my male friends to share feelings compared to my female friends. But I think even just nowadays, it's like, if you share your feelings and you seem incapable or whatever, it makes you weak. But, what does everyone say? Oh, you're stronger if you can actually share your feelings. Like, I think everyone has heard that too much. Like, it's just, I think that people just really should see that it's normal for life to not go well. And it's really just a matter of figuring out how to get through it. And, the people in your life who are around you can help with that. And they don't mind helping. People really don't mind helping you. They actually, like I said, it makes them feel good. It makes them feel it's good. Imagine, as someone who's feeling really down and maybe is suicidal, don't you feel better when you help someone? Like, yes, you feel great. You feel so needed, and you made your friend feel better. And so that's how your friend feels when you talk to them and bring them your problems. Like, they feel like, wow, I actually helped you. I helped you in this moment. I'm here for you. Makes people feel good.
After the suicide death of Naomi Judd,
Hmm.
where a country music icon, she and her daughter Winona were going to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame
Wow.
on that Sunday. And Naomi died by suicide the day before on Saturday. And I wrote a poem lyric right on what you're talking about people are there to help. And it was called Lift You Up.
Hmm.
And it starts off like you can never, like something like the most beautiful face, the most kind and loving heart, they hide their secret pain. And then it goes into, open up so we can lift you up, right? And then it's okay to lay down the burden, but don't give up your life.
Yeah.
Open up so we can lift you up, right? And I agree with you that we're I guess almost neurologically wired for connection with each other,
Yeah.
right? And there are those things called mirror neurons where if you're feeling a certain way, like emotionally, I can pick that up in my brain. I'm picking it up. Or
Yeah.
even it's interesting, physical movements. If somebody is moving their arm in a certain way, our mirror neurons start to trigger that we start to move our body in a similar way. So
Yeah.
that whole ability to reach out, and as you were saying too, how good it feels to help someone, right?
Yeah.
And that, sometimes a person could become ashamed, right? That whole silent shame and stigma thing,
Hmm.
right? But if we all say, as you're saying, which is the truth, like we're all human, we all have difficulties.
Yeah.
Life is not a rose garden
Exactly.
100% all the time. Even the
Yeah.
rose garden isn't a rose garden all the time,
Yeah.
right? That if we could just be real with each other, and as you said, to share that love, right?
Yeah.
That a lot of lives will be saved and a lot of heartbreak, will not be happening.
Hmm.
Yeah. Any last words before we say goodbye?
I guess, as someone who's surviving this, art has really helped me, music and writing. It's been very cathartic. And so, if you have to ever go through anything like this, I think it's just really helpful to find a way to express your feelings because I don't really know why I feel better writing a song about it. But like, as soon as it happened the next day or the day after, I was like, I just have to write a song about this. And like, it helped me so much. And now I can play this song and it's something beautiful and it makes people feel something, beautiful. And it's been really helpful to make something beautiful out of such a tragic event. So if one can find something like that, then I think it just really makes it easier. That and of course, having friends around and family.
What's the title of the song that you and your brother wrote?
So that one, I don't even think we came up with a title. That one we're not even releasing. We just did it for ourselves. It
Oh,
made us
okay.
feel a lot better. But the one that I wrote to my father, or the one that I wrote about it, is called "To Dad," like two colon dad. And yeah, that one, along with two other songs with similar topics, coincidentally, that I actually wrote previously, or co-wrote previously, will be out next month, sometime next month. I can't remember the date, but yeah, I'll definitely send them to you.
Yeah, send them to me and we definitely will share them, on our website, on the social media. I
Yeah.
want to thank you so much, Ginger.
Thank you for having me. This is, it's always helpful. It's helpful to help. Like I said, it makes you feel good to help. And so, especially with something like this, it's helpful to hopefully help someone, instead of just feeling really sad and alone. So, this has been very good for me.
I'm glad for that. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.